not used to picking up the phone, that they wanted to get a lot of warm conversations and warm leads handed over. And consequently, marketing was responsible for driving everything, the segmentation, the growth. But it was a very transactional type sale. I wouldn't say it was ABM at all. It was very one to many, many would be the way I describe it. But before we turn it over to our guest and Megan, do you have any thoughts as part of this?
I was surprised marketing was as high as it was, and balance sales and marketing even better. It's kind of nice to see marketing gaining more influence over. I'm going to guess it's more on the market insights side of this. I think I still see marketing not as involved as I would like it to be in thinking about growth strategy and sort of saying, hey, how are we going to hit our targets or come out of the last year really strong, kind of going into 2022. But I was pleasantly surprised to see marketing here. But I think your point's a good one too. It depends on your go-to-market motion, maybe the role that marketing is going to play in setting that strategy. And I think that's something. John Steiner, thank you so much for joining us today. Super excited to have you join the Account-Based Friday conversation here.
It's good to be here. I'm scratching my head at these poll results, frankly.
Yeah, I want to hear your take on this. What do you think?
Well, I think there's a little bit of confusion in the question, or it's a sort of multi-part question, because there's that insights part. And I wouldn't argue against the fact that marketing is well positioned as an insights organization. Sales has good insights from customers, often not as good on non-customers. And so somebody has to fill in that. And that's certainly a role for where marketing can play. And I think particularly in the portfolio marketing or product marketing space should be playing. Then I look at the marketing-led aspect of the growth strategy. And my interpretation of that is, if I look at my own organization, it's that the sales motion for growth, particularly of white space growth, is very much like a marketing motion. And so if I think that way and say, oh, well, prospecting is sort of a marketing activity, then what I see as it being a sales activity in my organization, I can understand as a marketing motion. So if you interpret prospecting as very much something that marketing understands and can do, then I can understand that 26%. The alternative would be to say, I've never seen in B2B, especially in big ticket B2B, a marketing-led organization. Never in, and I've been in this business quite a lot.
Although we see marketers moving into, CRO positions. We had, Brian Carden last week. He's now running sales as a CMO for his company. So it's changing. It's definitely changing. I think it's nice to see the profile of marketing, sort of become more strategic. But I think that's something, John, that might be a good way to sort of shift over to talk a little bit about the concept of buying groups or buying committees, and sort of the struggle that we continue to have in B2B to get people to shift over to using that construct. And it does, I think, go a bit to, the understanding of the strategy that you need as a business to reach your goals, and understanding who your buyers are. But there seems to be this sort of fundamental disconnect that persists in the market about using that construct and instrumenting around that construct. And I know you've been a big proponent of it. Would love to get your thoughts on sort of where it's going, where it's been, where it's going.
For me, that's the segue, for this program into ABM. So I think I'm comfortable with the idea that in sort of classic demand gen, because it functions at such large scale, that the marketing group idea it is kind of more distant, harder to get your hands around. It's deep and granular. It's not as popular in the organizations doing classic demand gen at scale. I put a link in the chat, and I don't know about you guys on the phone, but one of the things I'm constantly doing is looking for metaphors in the real world that I can apply to marketing. And there's this great article in the New York Times comparing the stride and the thinking and the forces involved in sprinting versus marathoning, and in combining the two in the 800. So it's a deep analysis of the differences. And to me, that's like a metaphor for what is different about ABM versus versus classic demand gen. And to my way of thinking, ABM is an opportunity to dig in deep and do a better job with a specific list of accounts that you have pre-qualified because you know they're good. You've pre-qualified them in some way. And now you're trying to get more revenue because you have already recognized that they should be a source of more revenue. So then the question becomes, how are you going to get more revenue? And my feeling is that you're going to get more revenue by doing a better job of identifying opportunities in those accounts and then closing those opportunities. So if I say, how are you going to do a better job of identifying opportunities? I start to think about, well, opportunities exist in B2B organizations around buying groups who are starting to try to solve a problem. So then I say, well, then how am I going to identify the buying group? I have got to create a process that allows me to do that. From there, I look at, well, what in my process is preventing me from doing that today? And I jump right to sort of the marketing SDR boundary. And I say, how are SDRs planning or being told to pursue accounts? And how are they told to set up meetings? And how are they told, how are they measured on the quality of those meetings? That's where I start to look at it. And if what I see is that the meetings, that they're measured on meetings, but not the quality of the meeting, that the meetings have one person in them, that the negative disposition, the ending is happening on one person in an account, that's where I start to focus. I say, if I can see more than one person engaging, I need to find a way to protect that engagement and not disposition it out. In addition, I say, when I'm setting up meetings, since I know that buying groups are the organization or the construct that is the opportunity that does the deal, how can I create meetings with buying groups? How can I increase the number of people in the meeting? And that's where we come in. Obviously, with TechTarget, we're going to show you people you should have in the meeting. And so how can I get those SDRs, their team lead, to allow them to create better meetings? That's what I'm thinking about.
Some of this is exacerbated by the systems too, right? The systems and the measurement of the leads within, say, Salesforce, for example. I call it the Humpty Dumpty syndrome. You're trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together again on the account side when you've got leads and there's, you're fractured all over the place. I'm curious. It's a very interesting and thoughtful idea about the SDR and looking at their compensation, because a lot of my experience has been around exactly what you just said, that the SDRs, their motivation is to get that meeting and do that conversion from lead to contact, or from stage 0 possibly to stage 1, or lead to stage 0 is more typically. But how do you incent the SDRs to have that group meeting mentality? Or are you doing something there at TechTarget, or are you thinking about it? Just
I'd say we're thinking about it. So one of the ways we're seeing the data is I can see engagement with target accounts adding up over time. But I know that I'm passing that as single leads to the SDRs, and they're qualifying or disqualifying those single leads. What we're doing is we're looking back at that engagement of multiple people at an account and saying, let's think again about how to re-engage and consolidate this expression of interest into a type of meeting that will move the client. This is actually to not just act on a visible opportunity. We're actually thinking before that. We're thinking about how do we create opportunity in the accounts. This is a sales side thing. So marketing is engaging multiple people on an idea, and sales is thinking about coalescing that idea into movement on the client side. So sales will be asking SDRs to create a meeting with these 5 people.
Well, and I mean, does that come down to enablement for the SDR to not sort of leave the conversation with that one person being willing to take a meeting, but helping them to say, who else needs to be part of this meeting, or who else would you, or being able to recommend? Typically, we would see, this person in a meeting. Do you think we could reach out to them and see if they want to join? It might be interesting to them. I mean, we're sort of providing them with that guidance. How are you doing that today? What do you think works well there?
I haven't seen much of that. So we haven't yet built this so that we're incentivizing SDRs to grow the meeting. I did, your former colleague, Malachi Threadgill, when he was on the client side, did a lot of work. And he moved from simply a meeting measure to a quality of meeting. So the number, the KPI was very simple. The number of quality meetings defined by meetings that convert into something that moves, right? I think that's a brilliant insight. That how do you incentivize SDRs to create quality meetings? Well, you've got to begin with a definition of what a quality meeting is, what the components are, and you probably have to create an offer, something that Gartner calls a high value offer, that creates interest in this group of people on the client side in taking a meeting with you. And so that idea of an offer that's not a deal closing offer, it's a conversation opener, that's a new idea. And it's an idea that sits between sales and marketing, because nobody really owns this. What kind of meeting? Well, it's not a closing meeting, it's an opening meeting. That's not typical of a sales organization. So here's where in ABM, marketing has to come together with sales enablement and sales to say, we need a new type of meeting. We know this account has huge potential for us. So we know that we want to engage them any way we can. So why would they engage with us? Well, they'll engage with us if we deliver quality. Mm-hmm. So what is that quality? It's certainly more than a simple asset. It is some value, gift of value to the client. Now you got to go and build those, right? And that's a new skill. So what we got here is, well, we've got to incentivize SDRs to build up meeting attendance. And in order to assist them, we have to have an offer to drive that meeting. And we've got to build that offer. And that offer has to be valuable enough to have multiple people at the client say, oh, I'll go to that meeting. I'll listen to that vendor talk. So there are these pieces, right? We got a process break and we've got a process creation that we have to solve.
We've got some lively chat comments started. Sorry, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. I see. Linda, you've put up your hand, and Kanako, you've got some comments in there too. But Linda, since you got your hand up, I'll let you jump in, please.
Thanks. Such a common sense point, right? And it's like a duh. Of course, we should be getting more people in these meetings because we're not selling to one person. So we've tried to do something almost like rephrase it, not a meeting, but we'd like to offer your company a briefing on a topic, and that, and I think your colleagues would be interested in hearing this too. I think that's how SDRs need to think about it, not so singular meeting focused, and then once they're able to get enough high value people at the meeting, then you bring in someone, not a sales rep, but maybe you bring in a thought leader from the company. So it doesn't feel like a sales meeting. It really feels like here's value because I'm going to brief you on a topic that your competitors maybe know and you don't. something like that. So I think that could work well.
Is marketing enabling that, Linda? Meaning, are you kind of giving the SDRs the content? And I guess the second part of that question is, do the SDRs work for marketing, or do they work for sales?
They work for sales. Well, we had, I guess, our top piece of content, which was, we're in cybersecurity, and we had this year in review, which, looked at the past year and highlighted all of the threats. And so what we did is we offered the authors of that report, who wrote it, who did all the analysis, on a virtual briefing, and that was the way we had pitched it. It was only a pilot, and I think we need to do more of that. But John, what you were talking about, that made me think that's kind of the approach we need to make more standard.
Yeah, it's not easy. It takes building new muscle, but I'm convinced that, let me just net this out, that we create ABM lists because this is a list of companies we know there's more revenue in. That's a very different idea than saying, let's get instant gratification from these companies now. So we know there's more revenue. We've got quota against these accounts. There's going to be quota against these accounts for years. So doesn't it behoove us to figure out a way to actually grow our connection to that company? And that's justification for making the changes within your marketing organization, your sales enablement, to create a new way of engaging, a deeper way of engaging, where salespeople now have the opportunity to create opportunities rather than just catching them. So I'm a huge believer that great sales, that the types that are assigned to target account lists, have the ability to create opportunities. But that's not as simple as closing, and they have to be enabled. And this is a way that marketing can enable them, by assisting with creating the structures to do these high value offers repeatedly. Now, you can do them in meetings, you can do them in custom tailored webinars to a larger set of companies that meet the same criteria on your target account list. You're still going to have to build that webinar program over time, right? So it's not just one webinar, it's a series, sort of like what Linda was alluding to, insight from Dragos on the security industry from the particular perspective of needs that clients like you have, delivered over time. Gives you the opportunity to see people who are looking at those webinars repeatedly and recommending those webinars to their colleagues as something they need to pay attention to. So you can go from an extended webinar program that covers more accounts to then the high value offer that says, now we're going to tailor something for this particular account. But you're building engagement with the account. You're making that investment. This is the marathon versus the sprinter, to engage with a company that you know has huge potential for you. If you're not willing to make that investment against those companies, you're not really interested. You're not prepared to do ABM, in my opinion. So you should be willing, because there's huge revenue there. So then how do you translate that into operationalization is the question I'm talking about.
Yeah, Keith just chatted in the comments here, and I think he makes a really valid point about the pressure we're putting on the SDRs in terms of marketing owning more of the journey. I mean, it's kind of a fine line, and that's why I was asking Linda too. Like, to what extent do you, it sounds like you have to enable the SDRs as part of this process. But I don't know, Keith, if you have anything else you want to add on that, or if you're in a position where you can add, because it looks like you got a lot going on there.
Yeah, it's a little noisy here, but I will try to add a little bit to that. I think we heard from Brian last week. The buyer's journey has changed drastically. Brian talked a lot about, using automation, using technology to further qualify leads, right? That way you can create a unified experience, With technology, you can do that in a very personalized way, and only introducing sales, at the last quarter mile. All right. Yeah. Listen, I'm a sales guy. I've been doing this for a long time, but I've also seen this drastic shift that people want to interact more digitally than ever before. You don't want to execute on a piece of intent with a sales rep too early in the process, right? That has to be operationalized and activated through marketing touches, right? Driving accounts through their own very personalized journey, but doing that with a degree of automation so that each account gets to go through their own journey at their own pace. And anything that bypasses that, has a chance of kind of disrupting the whole process.
Yeah, Keith, I'm glad you brought in sort of the tech piece here, because I think and I also agree that there is a tremendous amount of pressure on SDRs. And there's been a lot of coverage the last couple of weeks on how, younger workers don't want to go into sales. And I think part of it is driven by the sense that, if I go into an SDR role, it's kind of a high pressure scenario, or I'm trying to get somebody to take a meeting, as opposed to, Linda, what you just talked about, and John, what you're talking about is really kind of that always be helping mindset of how am I providing this person with something they can use? But then Keith, where you're going to is, and how do I do that without actually having to speak to a person at the same time? How do I make that an asynchronous piece of engagement? How do I make that something that's digitally led that a person can consume whenever they want? And we're less dependent on the connect rate of an SDR, and we're more dependent on that high value offer reaching that person in some way that they're going to consume it, and it's going to become part of a journey, and it's going to lead them to want to take that meeting or bring other people into the conversation or share that video or whatever it is we're providing them with. So it's kind of an interesting, I think we're at this transformational moment in B2B broadly, where you're kind of evolving from a human-led process to more of a tech-led process, but the tech-led process has to be incredibly human-informed and sort of human-dependent. But I think it's really interesting, kind of the scale piece of that and the tech piece of that.
Yeah, I'll just add one other thought. And again, keying off what I think what Brian said, last week, the rise of solutions like Drift and, that conversational chat bot, that takes on an essence of a persona, and even Conversica, the ability to qualify leads again, and that's less around chat, but more about emails and using emails. But again, we're so used to. We talk to our phones, we talk to our, our devices, and they understand us. Moving technology to that point where we are doing that very personalized but very automated qualification and moving people through the buyer's journeys is absolutely necessary today. And it's never been more available, and it will only become more available in the future as the technologies evolve.
John Steiner, would love to hear from you on that one. What do you see as kind of the role of tech and a combined sort of live and asynchronous journey?
Well, my mind's going a mile a minute here based on what Keith said. There's some interesting cultural kind of different angles for me. Let me start by saying this. As a marketer, I view SDRs as a potentially hugely valuable resource as human beings. On the other hand, to Keith's point, if I were to say, well, SDRs are a sales resource, I agree with him. I don't want to waste their time. But I don't really think of them as a sales resource. I think of them as part of the opportunity identification, opportunity qualification part of the process. Now, that probably depends a lot on organizational structure, but that's where my mind is at when I think about SDRs. I know, to Keith's point, that the sales organization might not think that way, and therefore we don't want to waste this resource on doing marketing tasks. I look at them as an opportunity to do marketing tasks, identification, qualification. That said, so if we say, okay, they are part of sales, they shouldn't be wasted on that, what are the other tools? As Keith said, yeah, I absolutely believe that there are tools that we can better use and structure to identify these groups, to qualify these groups. So when you build your drift conversation, can you shape it to attract more people to say, how can we get your colleagues involved in this conversation? Is there somebody else? And certainly we can do that with Conversica, right? On the outbound side, we can maintain connection with light connection with people. We can build up coalitions, at least identification. And so we can take it further downstream to the delivery of a high value offer. Further, the high value offer idea, as Linda, I think, was talking about, is something I really see marketing and working together with sales enablement to create. It's not really a sales thing. It's a marketing thing to grow engagement with the account. So if I accept Keith's perspective that we don't want to bother sales with this, I'm saying marketing is pushing further down the funnel. The flip side of that is that in the creating opportunity in ABM, I actually see sales potentially moving upstream and getting more involved in those accounts rather than relying on light marketing interaction.
Hey, I'll just add one last thing. We're talking about how to, engage a larger portion of the buyers group. We've left out display ads, LinkedIn ads, and surrounding, that individual person, but surrounding the other buyer group, the other buyers of that buyer group, and doing it in such a way that's scalable, repeatable, and reliable. And that's through very targeted display advertising, right? Thereby, trying to achieve the objective of getting to that broader audience.
Got it. Well, just looking at time here, I know we always have this situation where there's more content than there is time. We could probably all riff on this for another hour or two if we had the luxury of it. But before we go, John, any closing thoughts from your perspective as a CMO at TechTarget? Anything else that you want to close out with here?
Yeah, I really think that ABM is the future, and we've got to dig in. I think it involves generating this conversation in your company between what should sales be doing, what should marketing be doing, and what process barriers do we need to overcome. And so it assumes better alignment around the potential of the accounts on the target account list, which justifies that level of energy investment.
Couldn't agree more, John. And thank you again for being part of the conversation today. Definitely excited to have you join us again. I think there's a lot going on, and appreciate the going all in on ABM. I think a lot of folks on this call believe that too. Well, and everybody also thank you for being